Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Adventist Health Kern County's first Living the Mission podcast. We'll take an internal focus on an organization in regards to, in relation to patient experience, staff care as well. So it's really an inward focused podcast in highlighting individuals that are living the mission. And I just look forward to this inaugural podcast today. And today, in our first Living the Mission podcast, I have a guest here today, Gina Thompson, pharmacist here with Adventist Health. Welcome, Gina.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for having me on the very first podcast. I'm excited.
Yes. You know, when I was dreaming about this, thinking about this podcast, and I got a email from you as I was thinking about this podcast, and you sent me a wonderful email seeking out how to better care for patients, that we as employees may start having some type of difficult time to care for them, right? And how can we regain that love, care, and compassion for these patients? And by the way, as I kind of left out, today's topic is on compassion fatigue. And after I read that, I said, this is a perfect topic for the first Living the Mission podcast. So Gina, to get us started, tell us about that email. What prompted that email that you sent me?
Yeah, so for the past year and a half, I've been serving as the medication safety officer for Kern County. And in this role, I read and analyze our medication error reports and use Just Culture to look for systems-based safety solutions to help our team to prevent future errors. So also included in my duties is diversion monitoring of controlled substances and providing diversion education to our leaders. To do this, I monitor and review statistical reports. And during this work, I found that something just didn't quite feel right. And it was the fact that we were often discussing in statistical terms about real people who are both our team members and our patients. Well, one day I got a letter, and it was from a patient's family member, which was quite simply a plea for care. They expressed that their family member was brought to Adventist Health in drug withdrawal, and that what they experienced, unfortunately, was not the care that they expected. They expressed that the patient was treated, yes, but not cared for with dignity. No compassion was shared. The patient was ignored and not listened to. And there was little to no follow up interactions with this patient throughout their experience. It truly broke my heart to realize that the letter writer noticed such a disparity that they were called to action and wrote an advocacy of dignified care. And this is when I reached out to you. If you remember, I said we do our empathy health streams. We're taught about patient-centered care in school. So why do we avoid patient care for these antisocial groups? They're patients with labels like drug abuser, homeless, or criminal. And why might care avoidance be happening?
I like that word, care avoidance. Wow. You know, yeah, there's, when I think about that, over time, we develop these own ideas about patients. And after a while, these repeated encounters with the type of people that you describe, we may begin to lose that compassion for people. And that's, I hear it all the time, not just locally here, but just nationally, how we begin to put labels on these different individuals, and we stop having that care for them. And that's not who we are as an organization. You know, we have these values of living God's love by inspiring health, wholeness, and hope. And boy, it sounds like we didn't quite live up in their mind about our own mission statement, right?
Right.
So your question
So,
is go ahead.
yeah, so can you kind of explain what compassion fatigue is and how maybe that's different from the term we hear all the time, which is burnout?
Sure, they're somewhat similar. Compassion fatigue and burnout, they have a lot of the same symptoms. But compassion fatigue, the difference between compassion fatigue and burnout is compassion fatigue is something that can happen like that. It's a rapid onset. Um, it means you're doing fine during the day, and then you see that patient that is what you figure is a person who's coming to the ER just to get their drugs or get whatever, and then we just lose right there. We just lose that compassion and empathy for that patient, and it happens and it's repeated. While burnout is more of really strung out. It's expressed and felt in a long periods of time, and results in a lot of these symptoms of not caring, you're just overstressed and etc. But compassion fatigue is just when we start losing that love, care, and empathy for patients in those moments. And it's oftentimes because when we start experiencing these types of individuals that we put labels on, when it begins to happen over and over and over again, that's when we develop this compassion fatigue for individuals. So there's a lot of same symptoms, but just a little different nuance when it comes to compassion fatigue, because you may not be burned out, but you experience a patient and just lose all. You can just receive a bad attitude towards that individual.
I see how that can be different. So
Yeah.
burnout is something for over a long period of time, and compassion can be very individual, it seems.
Yes. It's these repeated events. Like one patient can be repeated events, kind of like somewhat like a trauma event, these repeated events, critical incidents that that the caregiver experiences, and they develop this attitude or approach to the care for an identified population that, as you described earlier. What's interesting when I thought about this is, we're all human. You're human, I'm human, the caregivers are human, and the patient is human. And being shut out from those that we're caring for, we may get annoyed that the person is shutting us out. See, we're trying to help this patient, and they're shutting us out. So when we feel shut out, we may feel that we are being prevented from seeing ourselves as caring individuals. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
When
that
they're
does make
shutting us
sense.
out, we've come here to care for you. You're shutting us down, and now we don't feel comfortable in who we are, because now we don't feel like that caring individual. And when we don't feel like a caring individual, that doesn't make us feel good, right?
Right. Right.
And so when we aren't able or when patients don't receive our care the way that we would want them to receive it by shutting us out, our frustration comes in when we don't feel welcomed. Whoa, right?
Yeah.
When we don't feel welcomed as a helpful presence in their own life as helping them. And then that really at times can make us develop antipathy, for patients over time, so we can begin to dislike a certain population of a group because they keep shutting us out for caring for them.
Yep. And then in those moments, it feels like we can't even accomplish our job, which is to care, because we are shut from that patient's
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah. So I don't think too many people think about that way. Is I get frustrated and angry. And in psychology, we use the word projection. When I don't feel like I'm caring, then I'm going to project it onto the patient. Well, I don't feel good about caring for you, or I don't feel that I'm caring for you because you shut me out. Now I'm going to blame you for that. And so, even though that people are coming in first for help and we are the caregivers, we understand that, but we also need to remember that we as the caregivers are human too. And we need to be aware of when we're starting to feel this way towards another person. Right.
Definitely. Definitely.
So when we begin to lose that compassion fatigue, we are actually feeling rejected.
That's a good point. And then, too, with how busy our hospitals are, with how many demands we have throughout our day, it's hard to not carry that with us when we're moving just moment to moment between patients.
That's right. That's right. And so I remember you're asking me, Tony, what do I do? What do I do for myself? Or how can I share this with my staff to help them get this back, or to see this population as God sees them? And I know that you are asking, is there any scriptures, or, what are some things that we can do? And, certainly being reflective and getting ourselves centered back to who am I, why am I here, and the work that I'm doing, the mission, right? And there is scriptures, of course, to reflect on about what it is to love, and that is to be kind and treat everyone with respect. And so to help us, it would be a good practice to take time. Well, number one is to be self-aware that you're beginning to feel this way towards a population or a person, and to know and to ask yourself, why am I feeling this way towards this person? You know, for instance, is it because I'm feeling rejected and they're not receiving that care? Okay, this is a little bit about me. Yes, it's real. I need to feel good about what I do too. You need to really process that. And then, as you're self-aware of that, then it's when you're reflecting, it's like taking those moments in your life to remember what love is. Love is kind, love is just. And so you really need to take that time, especially in caregivers, the ER and some of those high intense places. You really need to take those times to get in touch with yourself and be reflective. The other thing that I shared with you is kind of, I don't know if it's kind of hard, but I said to begin to appreciate and understand how they became who they are. right? So many of these individuals that we find difficult to care for, they've developed personality traits that push people away. There's things in their lives. There's things in their lives growing up that may have developed high drug use or homelessness, and they come to us, and we develop ways to protect ourselves. And one of those ways is to push people away, push society away, so I don't get hurt anymore. And so the drugs and other things, those are symptoms of pain. They're symptoms of pain somewhere else in their life. And so I shared with you, one of the ways, again, being reflective, is when we're being pushed away, how can we take a step back and think about and appreciate, this person has been wounded and they're pushing me away because they, in some way in their own mind, they don't feel safe, they don't want to get hurt, and they're protecting themselves. And when we understand that, hopefully in our mind, we can shift the way we see them and care for that person despite them not welcoming us in our care or rejecting us in our care. And that keeps us in touch with ourselves and keeps us continuing to care for these individuals like God would want us to care for them.
Definitely. And that's exercise in empathy for sure, to
Yes.
really see the deeper patient, the deeper person underneath all those layers. It's difficult, but it takes practice, but it's
Yeah.
definitely a gift to others when you can offer that.
That's correct. And that's the tension, right? And especially in healthcare, it takes time and practice. The
Definitely.
workplace is a very difficult time to do that. Um, but you can develop, as I train chaplains when it comes to assessments and everything, uh, over time, it can happen instantaneously. It can happen, you can develop this in the moment for yourself. But until you get there, we need to take that intentional and appropriate time to go home, reflect, self-aware, and do that type of work. So I'm wondering, Gina, after our discussion that day in our office, did you do anything with our conversation? Anything that's any interventions that you did for yourself or your staff?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
So, definitely a lot of reflection, as you talked about. But ultimately, I summed up our conversation with three facets of compassionate care. And that was empathy, which you spoke of, and reflection, which we talked a lot about. And then, third, purpose, being defined both as the reason why we're here and our intention with what we're giving.
That's right.
So empathy for the patient, in the case of this earlier patient, they came to us alone,
Mm,
but they had loved ones and advocates on the sidelines of their life. The letter writer talked about their loved one's journey and their attempts at sobriety. And
mm,
these things,
mhm.
they were not known to the caregiver, but they did exist in the patient's life at the time. So
Wow.
um, they definitely had deeper things going on. And then reflection, I say the reflection part is for us. So it helps us recenter and care for ourselves. It's that a self care moment. And it, like you're saying, as we practice more, it can just be a moment. But it really gives us perspective on the things that we're seeing and feeling, and gives us lessons that we can learn to move forward with a better outlook.
Mm,
And then the purpose piece is my favorite. In safety and just culture, we recognize that no one comes here intending to cause hurt or harm. We
yes.
are all here to do our best and lift up those around us. So I also like to point out that we get better at things when we purposefully practice.
That's
So
right.
we have to
That's right.
also decide that we want to do it. This also defines purpose for me.
Wow.
So it ends up being something for the patient, empathy, something for myself, reflection, and then what I'm actually doing about it all, which is the purpose.
Wow, that is so wonderful. And what I hear is it's not just one thing, it's a system of care. You know, when someone comes into our presence, it's not just an individual. There's so much more. It's a constellation of care that's going on, and to be aware of that constellation of care, that it's about you or about the caregiver, it's about the patient, and it's about you know of seeking, the understanding of this person has come from, it didn't come from a vacuum. It came from a lifetime of hurts, and this is what we're dealing with in a hospital. And a lot of times when I talk to chaplains, it's just like people just aren't coming in here as a blank slate, and
Oh, yeah.
multiple things happening at the same time in the care that we provide. And as we kind of bring this to a close, and as we think about our mission, if there's any place in the community where people can experience God's love, should be Adventist Health. And let me end with this story, and maybe some lasting thoughts that you may have, and maybe some people that are listening that you can just give some bullet points or advice to as well. Many years ago, there was a 40-some-year-old young lady in our burn center. And I spent quite a time with her. And she shared the horrific stories that I cannot repeat on this podcast of her life. After 3 or 4 months of care, when she was leaving and being discharged, she broke down in tears. Gina, she did not want to leave the hospital.
Oh.
And this is the reason why. She says, being here in the hospital is the first time I have ever experienced love.
Oh.
With Adventist
Oh,
Health.
Tony, that brings a tear to my eye.
Yes. And if we keep this in mind as an organization, and that's the mission of who we are, we're not only here to cure, but to heal the broken heart and care for the soul as well. And so I just want to thank you for being the first guest on a Living the Mission podcast here in Adventist Health, Kern County. But I just want to give you the last word here before we end. Any lasting words, Gina?
Oh, thank you, Tony, and thank you for sharing that story. That was just so great. And, these things don't come easily, and not all of us have everything already. A lot of things take practice. And if we just take that moment to practice once this week or once today, eventually it will become our normal practice. And things get better with time. It doesn't matter if you're good at it to start, you just have to start. So, with that, I hope that everybody gets the chance to practice empathy, reflection, and purpose, and get out there and provide the best care we possibly can.
All right. Thank you, Gina. Again, I can't show enough gratitude to be the first guest here. And God bless you and the great work that you do as a pharmacist, and bringing healing and comfort to those, especially to that population that comes in seeking love and support and healing from us. So thank you, Gina.
Thank you.